and welcome to another episode of Exploring Intersections. My name is Meenakshi Iyer. I am your host and the founder and principal of North Star Solutions and Services, which is a boutique, future work oriented virtual coaching, training, and consulting practice. And we specialize in partnering with mid career technology leaders, women in tech, and folks like myself who speak English as an additional language in helping them shape their people and change leadership journeys. And I love hosting these conversations at Exploring Intersections because I don't know about you, but I love intersections because I think that they are home to diverse perspectives, and it's a very interesting space. It's an agile space, and it's a great opportunity to develop empathy for points of views that are different from our own. So that's why I do this, and we get together. I'm here every other Wednesday at 8 a.m. New York time. And I would love to hear from folks that are watching us live. First of all, thank you for taking the time to join us. Pop it in the chat. Tell us where you're joining us from and what are you excited about today's conversation? Because we do have a very, very interesting topic and an exciting conversation lined up with an amazing guest. So once again, thank you for joining us. And we are live on Facebook, LinkedIn, and YouTube. Please make sure that you like, follow, and subscribe all of those channels so that you can watch the replay as well. So today's intersection is time and wealth. And why not time and money? Well, that's what we're about to find out. And today's guest is Marissa Lee. And let me bring Marissa onto our stage. Welcome, Marissa. Thank you for joining us bright and early.
Yes, I'm so excited to be here. Welcome to everyone.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. And, Marissa and I, we met via LinkedIn, and
We did.
we have had a lot of conversations in our posts and so on and so forth. And we also met through a common friend, Tiffany. And you'll be seeing more of me and Tiffany later today when we get into our conference starting at 11 New York time. More about that in a bit. And so I'm really excited to have you here, Marissa. And I know that you wear many hats. You have been an HR leader, you are a speaker, an author, and a solopreneur now of SOW EVOLVE. So excited to have you here and have this really interesting conversation because I follow your work and I know you talk about time wealth, and that's how this whole thing originated. And I remember that when I first reached out to you, the title was more like time and money. And then I'm like, wait a minute, you talk a lot about wealth. So I think it should be time and wealth. And that's how we are here. So first of all, I'd love to invite you to share a little bit more about yourself, your journey of what has gotten you to this intersection of time and wealth.
Yes, so thank you for that in the introduction. So I am Marissa Lee. I'm the founder of SOW EVOLVE LLC, where we focus in on helping leaders develop. So we do leadership development and life development. That is our space where we do coaching and consulting to help leaders through their journey through life. And my journey of getting here was, of course, probably similar to other people as they talk about their purpose work. It was living the experience. So going through life and being the person who was burned out, being the person who was always on and didn't know how to disconnect, being the person who really couldn't see the possibilities of how to optimize time to make time work for me. And so I was in a situation where I ended up in the hospital and I just had so much stuff going on. And I was like, yeah, this has to change. Can't keep doing this. And don't want to find myself in this situation again. And there were a lot of different things that actually were a part of getting me to that point. But it took that situation to help me have the aha moment, even though there were a lot of different things that were giving me the signs before to say, hey, you need to slow down. Hey, you need to, check in with yourself. Hey, you need to really think through, how you're navigating through life. And so getting to that point, I had a time to reflect, and I had a mentor that said, Marissa, God wants to bless you with so much, but you don't
Mm.
have the capacity to even receive it. And that hit me like a ton of bricks as well. So hospital stay, feedback, like it's like, this, it's the story of like God sending the message and the people like, oh, then you get to heaven, you're like, why didn't you save me? It's like, yeah, I sent you all the messages, you just didn't listen. So I'm like, I'm listening. And so from that helped to really push me into the time of journey, speaking about it,
Mm.
advocating about it.
Mm.
And I've always, you will hear people talk a lot about work-life balance, self-care, and all of that is just, it's mixed into time wealth. It's
Yep.
being able to create that and make the most of your time. But there are other components that come along with that, which I'm sure we'll get into today, of
Yeah.
how you're managing your life. So time is just one component. And
Yep.
that's the big thing I wanted to make sure there's a distinction of, it's not just time management, but time management is incorporated into creating time wealth.
Yeah, absolutely. So well said, and so much there, right? You touched upon so many different aspects of like work-life balance, and the other thing that I sensed in what you shared was we tend to operate from a space of scarcity when it comes to time and even wealth to a large extent. So it was really insightful to hear your journey and how what got you to this point. And I couldn't agree with you more. Sometimes it's some of these sort of not so positive experiences that bring us to where we needed to be right from the beginning, right? So
Right.
thank you for sharing your journey. And the one of the first questions I want to ask you really is, how do you differentiate, or what's your definition of time and I'm sorry, of wealth and money? Like, what's the difference?
Yeah. So I think the difference comes down to, you'll hear people say old money and new money, right?
Mm.
And when it's new money, you will hear more people talking about being rich, and they just got the money, they're learning how to deal with it, and get associated with their relationship with money, and if they're going to be able to keep it. When you get to wealth, it's about generational wealth, it's legacy, and hence the combination of time wealth. From my organization perspective, I don't want it to be where you just learn it for yourself. I want it to be where you're creating a legacy. If you're a leader, how are you creating that for your employees, and how are they creating that for themselves and their employees and the people that are connected to them, and vice versa. So it is more about, the difference is, one is really speaking to the legacy of how you utilize, whether it's money or in my case, the time.
Hmm. That was brilliant. It made me realize that I had this understanding of the legacy aspect of wealth, but the way you shared it, in that, if let's say if I'm the first generation that's focusing on this, for example, that by thinking through it, I'm really looking at and if I bring in the legacy lens, then I'm looking to do is really creating wealth. It doesn't, because I think one of the misconceptions that I've had about wealth, and I realize it's a misconception after hearing you share this, is that, well, somebody in my ancestry should have done their bit to generate the wealth, right? But I could be the one to start that, and I think
Yes.
that's such a sense of empowerment when I think about that. Thank you for sharing that. And I see Tiffany. Thank you for joining
Hi,
us. We just
Tiffany.
talked about you.
We did.
uh, so something else that comes up for me is, what what was the inflection point in your personal professional life, other than what you already shared, that really brought you to saying, okay, this is what I'm going to do. This is going to be my solopreneurship, whatever I'm going to do for this phase of my life and career.
Yeah, I would say So Evolve has evolved. It continues to evolve, and that's just a part of people being on journey. Their journeys, you're not meant to say the same. I will often say, don't let Apple out upgrade you. You should always be upgrading yourself as you go forward. And so within my business, it launched with my book, Why I Broke Up with My Company, and how I was focusing in on helping people own their careers and organizations get more in tune with what cultures are they creating, how are they creating the space to help people own their careers and want to stay with their organizations and stay engaged. And so that work is still the work that I do today. It just has evolved, meaning as I was supporting people from a career coaching standpoint, one of the epiphanies I've had also being in organizations is if you don't work with the leaders and the leaders aren't in tune, it doesn't matter what I'm giving you. You have to be in the right environment to be able to flourish. And so I said the opportunity is really working with the leaders to be able to hold the mirror up so they're
Mm.
able to see, because most leaders are like, yeah, I'm a good leader, I know what I'm doing. We all have opportunities to continue to grow and
Yep.
develop, and sometimes you need the person to shine the light on the area you may not see or hold that mirror up. And that's where I come in. I'm
Mm.
up here like, here you go, so you can see like you're doing this great, but over here we need to work on that a little bit. And so that had led to me really getting into the leadership development space.
Mm.
And as I was digging deeper and deeper, I wanted to be able to assist in a different way, because there's a lot of people talking about leadership development. And I started sitting down with leaders and talking with them more, doing more market research. And in those conversations, they're like, yeah, I want to do this, but I don't have the time. And time just kept popping up. And I'm time. And I was like, okay, God, I see what you're doing here. So I'm like, all right. And then in the meantime, I'm having my own journey. I'm having my own things that I'm going through. And I'm like, oh, I see how this is coming together and where there's the opportunity to really help leaders be their best.
Mm.
If they don't have the time, they don't have the energy, the capacity, they don't know how to set boundaries, it's going to be hard for them to be able to be that best leader. And
Mm.
that's how I got to Time Wealth.
What a journey. What a journey. So can you tell us, what does this intersection really mean to you?
Yeah. So for me, when I define time wealth, it speaks to creating the abundance of discretionary time to be able to live and lead the life you desire. And there's a lot that goes into it, but that's it in its simplest form. How are you optimizing your time, your energy, your capacity, your priorities, being clear on that to be able to reflect on yourself, understand your values, understand the boundaries that you need to create whole life harmony. So the points I just mentioned are the 8 components or the 8 pieces of the time wealth wheel that I take people through to understand those different aspects, to really know what's their relationship with time. And if you think about it, and if you reflect on your origin story with time, we all start off on somebody else's time, right?
Mm.
And there's pieces of that as you evolve where it's going to be more other people's time versus your own. And time was set for us. Our schedules were set for us. And I often talk about, like, when I was a kid, I didn't have to make no big decisions. It's like, am I going to have grilled cheese or chicken nuggets? Like, it's like something as small as that. It was big for me back then because, so I wanted those chicken nuggets, but then it was sometimes grilled cheese. But it was like, those decisions were big at that time, but in the whole grand scheme of things, they become more and more important when we start adulting and we start leading other people and we start having families and all these other things that come along with that. And then the responsibility of optimizing time, energy, and things like that become ours, but we're not seeing that and not necessarily have been equipped to do that well
Mm,
because the schedule was always created for us. And
mm,
as you get to high school, then you're adding more on your plate. But still you don't have the other responsibilities and those different elements. And so as I'm talking to people about their time off journey, you have to go back to the beginning
mm,
and you have to really think through where are you at now. And so that's a part of some of the coaching that I do to help people unpack and really think through so then they can have the breakthrough in that space. Because one of the things I'm sure we'll talk about is, why don't people do it, or why do people struggle with the
mhm,
intersection, right? And a part of it is they don't see it as possible
mm,
because they haven't really been taught that. And so that's where I'm coming in to say it's possible. And I
mm.
put something up the other day. I was like, are you struggling after losing that hour? Yeah, look at me. I'm good. Let's talk, right?
Yes,
So
yes.
there's an opportunity there.
Yeah, absolutely. And I love what you said, right? We all start on somebody else's time. That's so true. We're not really setting our own schedules or learning to be responsible for how we spend our time or invest our time, depending on, it really depends on what is it that we're doing with our time. Um, so, and what you said towards the end, it really segues into the next question I had, which is around, what are the top one to three challenges that people often experience in maintaining balance at this intersection?
Yeah. The first one is really around limiting beliefs of being able to have time. And I
Hmm.
will always say, you have time. You just have to see what you're spending it on. That's
Hmm.
where your time bank is. You just may not be spending it on the right things. And that's where I help people get that clarity around that. But when I talk to people about time wealth, our words matter. So we have to be very mindful of how we're speaking about it. And even if you don't have time for a specific thing, it's, I don't have time for this specific thing, but you have time and you just decided to focus on something else. So number one is definitely the belief of being able to get there and helping people see there is a path to creating that whole life harmony and understanding what does balance look like, integration to get to harmony by that time wealth. So I would say that's number one. And managing, like the people around, because you have to you own your time and you're responsible for that, but you're still on other people's time in different regards of like as you're navigating through life. So how do you, very similar to with the boundary, how do you make the boundary for yourself to teach people how to treat you? Same way with your time. And that's where that boundary management piece comes in. I would say the second thing is people don't understand the relationship with time. So we just kind of like go through life and it's like, oh, okay, yeah, I got time for this, time for that, but not really understanding how they've utilized time. And they may have had the privilege to not have to think about it.
Hmm.
While there's other people who may be better at it because they didn't have that privilege. You have to make sure all these things are in a certain way and done in a certain time and optimizing your energy, because if you don't, it could impact the experience you're having. If you're not clear on your priorities, it could impact, how you're navigating through the workforce and how you're being seen. And so there are different elements of that where as people continue to navigate through, you have to understand what your relationship with time is. And most people don't. And the third thing I would say is people want to see the change overnight. And it
Hmm.
doesn't happen like that. It really comes down to your everyday habits. What are you doing every day to own? You have to win the day. Sometimes you have to win the minute, the hour, right? But in the
Yes.
day, before you go to like seeing this time wealth evolution. And you
Mm.
have to want to see that. And so from an organizational standpoint, that's where oftentimes if the leaders get to the point of 1 and 2, it's like, how do you connect that with the organization piece of changing every day? Because it's not necessarily your fire you have to put out, but a fire ends up on your desk, and something else from somebody else's, their urgencies end up in your space. So how do you manage through that? How do you make sure you are keeping your time in a safe space,
Mm.
but also giving people grace as they go through their own journey or lack thereof? And there is an art to that. It doesn't just happen overnight. You have to learn that for yourself first. So
Yeah.
then you can teach people how to treat you. And then as they see you having more time, like I went on a trip and I didn't take a laptop and I was like just enjoying myself. And they were like, how did you do that? I said, let me tell you, come here. Think about it, right? But it's possible, even if you're higher up in the organization. But what I would say, it looks different. Like some
Mm.
people, when they look, they don't want to completely disconnect because they love what they're doing. It's finding out what works for you.
Yep.
So one person, it may be, I want to disconnect. I don't want to work weekends. The other
Mm.
person is, I just don't want to work all of the weekend. I want to
Mm.
keep it to just 4 hours Saturday and be able to spend the rest of my time with my family. And I think that is an important part of the Time Wealth journey and really helping to get it into organizations, because
Mm.
it does look different when you are talking to different levels. And it's making sure that if you're at a senior level, that may be your preference, and the impact of the work that you do requires you to be more attached. But that doesn't mean you set that expectation for somebody, on the front line, because
Yep.
the work is different, the scope is different, and the values and what they need and what they're looking for is different. And so that's how organizations can incorporate that, into their engagement strategy and retention strategy.
Wow, such a lot of insights, amazing insights. And the last few things that you shared, it brought out a couple of things for me. One is your own interdisciplinary career coming through, your experience as an HR leader, and then thinking about time wealth. You earlier on in the conversation, you touched upon burnout, which is top of mind for me and Tiffany right now,
Yes.
with the conference coming up today. Um, and the other thing that you shared is like, finding out what works for you. And that truly speaks to work-life integration. And that's the way of the future of work, because work is no longer, at least in the knowledge economy, work is no longer a place, but an activity. It's not a place you go to anymore, given how we can all use technology to work from wherever we are. So it's really about how are you designing the use of your time in that. And I love what you called out about it. The higher up you are, the work demands on by virtue of your role, they're different from somebody at the front line. So you can't have the same expectation of how people use their time, or how much of their time are they using for work. That's such a great call out. And I think that it's such a critical element when it comes to organization design and team design and work design. And that really builds equity in a way.
It
That's what
does.
struck me just now. Yeah. Um, so can you talk a little bit more about like some typical outcomes that people experience when they work with you?
Yeah. So one, it's starting with the clarity on what are they looking for when they start this journey. Because usually people have some insight of like, I just want more time to do this thing or that thing,
Hmm.
and helping them be able to see, okay, when you have this excess of time, which is a part of the time wealth, and you're creating that legacy, what are you going to do with it? And how do you make sure you're redeeming time for the future? Because that's one of the things I talk about, redeeming time versus reclaiming time, because it speaks to like, okay, there may be some bad behaviors in the past. you're atoning for that. You get your time back and you reclaim it. And now you do better with the time in the future. So you're redeeming that future time that's coming. And so when you have that time, how do you leverage it and use it? And so this is helping them get the clarity, but make the most of their life. Because one of the things we know is our start date, but we don't know our end date. We don't know how much time we actually have. So helping people be able to make the most of that time is one of the outcomes. The other outcomes is connected to just goals they've designated for their time goals, whether it's getting more sleep, being able to eat breakfast, being able to make time for the things that they just haven't been incorporating in. Those are some of the measurement points, because, we talked a little bit about burnout, and some of it is people just aren't getting rest. And rest isn't just connected with sleep, but they look at it as, I don't have time for that because I need to do all these 50 million things that are on my list. So it's helping them get focused in on what's the critical few. What are those priorities? How does that connect with what you are looking to do personally? There's the life aspect. And then professionally, what does that look like? What is the organization going after? And are you really aligned with working on the right things? And if not, let's talk about how you have that conversation. So that's when it's getting into understanding the values, self-management, and boundary management, because your plate is going to be full with other people's stuff. You may not even want to eat that, but it's on my plate, right?
Yep,
And so how do you deal with that? And I often share with people, and it's a bad phrase in the workplace, like, that's not my job. But I don't look at it that way. I look at it from a standpoint of people. It's like a cry for help, meaning I have too much on my plate that I'm dealing with. And now you're trying to add something else. That's not my job. I can't take that. And so if you take a step back and unpack that, it's like, well, let's explore a little bit more as to why you're saying this and how we can create a space so people don't feel overwhelmed and to the point where they are frustrated and feel burnout. And that's where organizations, from an organizational perspective of helping them win, it's really helping them get clear on their priorities. How that I talk about resizing the picture, because big picture is great for, just the vision and things, but people need to understand, what does that mean day to day? And if you can't articulate that and explain that, that makes it harder for them to know they're focusing on the right things. So it's resizing the picture for people with their priorities, making sure the capacity is there. So the whole doing more with less, and this exciting time with AI and all of that coming in. But then there's still the component of, AI may take this place, but you're still expecting people to do more. Like, let's unpack that and what that means and how you help them feel like they can do more, and make sure when they're doing more, it's the right things. So I more so speak to, how do you, when we're talking about doing more with less, you have to get focused on what less is. And less is, to me, is more so around not doing things that don't add value, not doing things that is going to impact the organization, not committing to things, because that's another piece. A lot of times organizations will commit and they have not thought through how they're going to execute. So then they're trying to play catch up in those regards. So helping people be able to think through that. So there are a lot of benefits, a lot of results that comes out of getting great at time well, whether it's personally or professionally or organizationally. And that's why I'm such a big advocate around, you need this. You need this to be able to take you into the future as you're thinking about the future of work, what your employees have been sharing with you, especially more recently with the pandemic, and they're focusing on what really matters for them, and well-being, work life harmony, integration, all that is incorporated into what they're looking for and what they value. And so as you assess that, time wealth really speaks to being the solution to optimizing what the organization needs to be successful and marrying that with what the employees need so they feel like they can live and enjoy and embrace their whole life.
Mm, yeah, so beautifully said, Marissa. And you know what just came up for me is that this conversation, and I had not planned it at all this way, is such a fantastic precursor to our conference today, because all of those things that you talked about, we operate from us operating from this sort of scarcity mindset and focusing on what are we really focusing on? Are we doing the right things, or are we just doing whatever is on our, like you said, I mean, it's, I don't even want that, but it's on my plate, so
Right.
I'm kind of forced to eat it. Do we continue on like that? And the other thing is also around uh, the it's not just about identifying what all to do. The real strategy is in thinking through, and also being clear on the how,
Yes.
and the impact and the dependencies and the risks and all of that. So really being uh, responsive in a way to that, sense and respond, if you will. As you shared this, though, something that came up for me is, how do you uh, this feels like a lot of having the need to have a lot of structure around investing and using my time. How do you balance having flow with that? What's been your experience with your clients and in your work?
That's where time wealth allows room for flow. So if
Mm,
you think about it, if you're in a state beforehand, it's usually chaotic. You don't have time to flow. You don't have time to be creative. You're chasing after everything and everything that somebody needs you to do. While time wealth gives you the space to say, yes, I want to say yes to this. And I know it's connected with my mission and purpose. And so this is definitely something I should be investing my time in. Or no, this isn't aligned with that. And so so I need to opt out or select out of this. And then you have the discretionary time. So if you just want to just say, I want to try something new, you can try something new. And so that's where I've seen time wealth be able to really help because, as I said with the definition, it's a part of that discretionary time. How do you create an abundance of that discretionary time so you have the time of the thing you have to do? There's certain things we have to do, whether it's working or personally, but then there's that bucket of time that most people don't have to do the things they want to do. So the pet projects, the trips that really should be a part of what you should be doing, but people will put that in the category of like, well, this is something I can select out of. And I would say time wealth, the list that you would write where you could, if you're drilling it down and say, all right, these are the things I have to do, and if I have time, then I'll get to the other things.
mm,
Time wealth gives you the space to flow between the have to do and the want to do.
want to do. Mm, I
And a
love
lot of
that.
people don't get there. And I'm like, y'all, we got to get there. We got to change these organizations around there because around that topic, because if we can do that, you will start to see organizations change the experiences they're creating for their people.
Yes.
And that, because you talked a little bit about equity earlier, that's a big part of like the experience, and the equity comes across many ways. It's not just pay equity, even though
Yes.
today we should highlight that,
Yes.
right? But there's also the aspect of the experience equity. Are people getting the same type of opportunities?
Yep.
And does that look the same? And how do you create that space? Are people exerting more energy than other people? Why is that? And really breaking that down to see that piece. And time wealth creates the space to force the conversation,
Yep.
but also solve it. So it's not just bringing up the problem. It's going to highlight the problem, but it's also there to say, here's the solution of how
Hmm.
you can navigate through that.
Yeah, yeah. So well said. So well said. And uh, I was thinking of something and I saw Tiffany's comment here. Thank you, Tiffany.
I'm professional. Yes.
Experience equity. Yes, that's so true. And I've been in environments where the organization, as a policy, may have what they would call as unlimited PTO or flexible time off or whatever you want to call it. And then I have learned in those environments where not everybody can avail of that.
Yeah.
And it really depends on which team they're a part of, what the nature of their work is, their role is. And I personally have worked earlier on in my career when I had to restart my career in the US. I remember working jobs where I was considered essential, which means none of those holidays applied to me, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And so, and there are a lot of industries like that: hospitality, healthcare, essential services. Like several of us worked during COVID as well, right? We didn't get any respite from there. So there are, not all industries are created equal, and that part I think is at least understandable, because you are uh, you know what you're getting into most times, right? But within organizations, if there's inequity around these in these areas, then that's a much harder problem to solve.
I look at that in a couple of ways. Like you mentioned, there are certain aspects where you will be deemed essential. And this is kind of speaking to when I mentioned earlier of like, if you're higher up in the organization, due to the scope of your role, there
Mm,
are certain things you're going to have to commit to. So coming back to what is your have to do versus your want to do.
yeah.
So understanding that piece of how, that work may look different across the organization. However, where the equity comes in, how do you create that space where within the confines of the work that they have to do, there's the flexibility there. They get to experience life in with taking into consideration the things that they have to do. And oftentimes what you see is the essential aspect takes center stage, meaning that, well, this is just stuff that you have to do. Everything is not a have to do, but it is, we're conditioned it's a have to do. We
Mm,
are expected for it to be a have to do. And that's where I am working to help people and organizations unlearn that. You
mm,
have to unlearn that, so then you can create more of that equity apart. And then people who do, let's just say, take more recently from the pandemic they had to be in, there was an opportunity to use that to create a better experience of like, yes,
mm,
we know you have to be in, but here's the flexibility that comes along with that. So you may have you work earlier in the day, and then you can have this back part of the day out, or really thinking about what did they need to create the space where they can do the things that matter to them. So
mm,
it's really getting back to the point of what really matters to the individual and for the organization's success, and marrying that.
yeah.
And oftentimes what's centered is the organization, and not necessarily even the organization. It could be the leader's preferences
So true.
around how the organization should be leading and how they should be working. So there's this big conversation around, should everybody be back in the office?
Yeah.
It's a lot based on the preference of the leader,
Yep.
as opposed to, well, what are the people telling us?
Yep.
Some want to be in the office, some don't want to be in the office. So how do we balance that? How do we
Mm,
marry that and take that into consideration? And that's not always done. it usually comes back to, well, here's that preference. So if you don't have a progressive leader, then it may be like, see y'all 5 days, and then you have the whole point of like, this doesn't work for me. I need more time. I need more flexibility. A lot has changed since the pandemic. I've moved away. I'm going to have to leave you. Now you're having retention issues, productivity issues, engagement issues. And we all know that doesn't help with, quote unquote, the bottom line profitability. And so as you get better at doing those things, you will see all the things for an organization to be successful. And that's where Time Wealth helps you, again, shine the light and also be the solution.
Yep. I loved what you called out, that there is always an opportunity to examine the current state, the status quo, instead of just taking that as the starting point for whatever we need to do next. And that's such a fantastic call out. The other thing that stood out for me is when you said that a lot of decisions around ways of working within organizations, they are rooted in individual leaders' preferences. And
preferential leadership.
Yeah. So true. And the larger your sphere of influence, the greater the responsibility in decision making, because what you decide and the parameters you use to make that decision have such a far and wide-reaching impact within the organization, right? Yeah. So many things that you brought to the forefront. Thank you for that.
And if I can add one piece, when you were talking about the point around evaluating, what I also see is that organizations speak to not having time. So you will hear them talking about, flying the plane while you're building it, changing the tires on the bus while you're driving it. First of all, you can't do it. You cannot literally do it. So that's one of my pet peeve statements, both of those. But you can't you can't drive it and it's not working. You can't fly it while you're building it. But it's speaking to the point of not having the time to do what they need to do on the front end, because there's so many things that have to get accomplished. What I am looking to help them do is, let's finish that plane. Let's finish, changing the tires on this bus so you can go fast, so you can fly and get to where you need to get to safely. And really take into account not stressing people out on the way. That even going with that scenario, people would be stressed. Like, you're on this bus, you're changing wheels. Like, what's really going on here? Same with flying and you're building it. And using just even the language and terminology we use in the workplace that really speaks to the problem that's at hand and that we need to look to fix as we're going forward. So I just had to call that piece out, because time, it's an element of time, and people feeling like they don't have the time to stop and examine to really make the best decision. They just go with whatever information they have and hope for the best. As people say, hope isn't a strategy. It's necessary. You do need hope, but you also need to have the aspect of really fleshing out what that strategy looks like so people can execute appropriately.
Yep. And you actually already answered the next question I had for you. That's what I put up here right now. How might leaders and organizations embrace this intersection to create value and impact? And that's absolutely true. And one of the things I always talk about is slowing down to speed up.
Yes.
Right. You don't, and I could not agree with you more. If you're fixing the car and trying to drive it at the same time, they are not simultaneous tasks that can be done simultaneously or should be done simultaneously. And we don't actually save time in the process, although it might feel like it. And we're just fooling ourselves into thinking that that's an efficient way of doing things. And the other thing is the cost of rework in those scenarios and the time it takes to do the rework. And the other thing that what you shared brought up for me is that time is the only sort of irreplaceable resource, if you will.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Wealth probably to some extent as well, but it's more gradual, but at least you can make it up. But time is something that you can't really gain back.
You
And,
can't.
and as I said that, oh, this is one of my pet peeves when people end meetings early and they say, "Let me give you your 5 minutes back." Like, I'm not getting anything back. So that doesn't make any sense to me. Um, as we begin to wrap up our conversation today, Marissa, I could talk to you for hours about this because one of my mottos is stop, breathe, think, act.
Mm-hmm.
And it's so hard, and it's like we're too busy to improve.
Yeah.
There's that little cartoon. So we keep using a square wheel
Yes.
instead of a round one because we're too busy to improve. And that's what you brought out so beautifully. Um, so as we begin to wrap up our conversation, and once again, I want to thank everyone that has been watching us live. Tiffany, thank you for all your wonderful comments. And to those who will watch the recording. So this was episode 18 of Exploring Intersections, Time and Wealth. And we've been chatting with our guest, Marissa Lee. So Marissa, as what are your parting thoughts? What's the one thing you would want our viewers and audience to take away today?
I would want them to start with understanding their relationship with time.
Mm.
And that part is so critical to being able to start any type of time wealth journey, just to get familiar with, okay, what is current state? And that will help you start to see, like, if now's the time, and I'm gonna, give you a sneak peek. Now is the time, but but it helps you see that now is the time, whether you're an individual or an organization, that you need to invest in understanding this so you can make a difference in not only your life, but the life of others. And that's the bigger part and impact of time wealth, and the legacy part of it, as we started this conversation with, it's not just about you. It's
Mm.
about the people around you. It's about the people who are coming after you. And how do you create that difference so they can have a different experience? You can have a different experience because it starts with you and your
Mm.
experience, as you go forward, and really understanding that origin story and your relationship with time and your aspirations around how you want it to be better, that is going to help set the tone for you creating something different in your life and in the workplace.
Beautiful, beautiful. Thank you so much. And if people want more of you, how do they get a hold of you?
Absolutely. I am on all social media platforms. Yes, I am. And we can talk about how I make time for that, because I'm not on there like all the time. But I'm on all social media platforms at I am Marissa Lee. On Facebook, it's I am versus I am. Marissa Lee. And then you can also visit me at my website, www.SOEVOLVE, so the company name, .com. And there you would be able to start your time wealth journey by taking an assessment, join my newsletter, or start the whole process. So feel free to reach out to me, and I'm pretty active on social media with different posts and tips and comments and things
Yes.
like that. So feel free to engage and ask your questions, and let's do this time wealth journey together.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Marissa. And yes, I enjoy watching your videos. I see them on LinkedIn.
Yeah.
That's fantastic. Thank you. Thank you for everything that you do. And thank you for sharing your time with us today and generating all this wealth of wisdom for us. So this has been absolutely wonderful. And before I close for today, I'd love to invite everyone that's watching right now. There's still time to join us at our conference. It's starting at 11 o'clock Eastern, so it starts in about just a little over 2 hours. It's Burnout, the Silent Pandemic, Creating Sustainable Recovery by Embracing Equity. So several of the elements that we covered today will also be part of the conversations that we're going to have today. The focus is really on how to recognize burnout and how to help build some tools and strategies that can help you not only recover from burnout, but also prevent it from happening in the future. So that's the focus for our conference. So I could not be happier that Marissa, you and I had this conversation today. It's just worked out, and I love the way it worked out. So once again, thank you so much for your time, and I look forward to keeping up these conversations.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Much gratitude. Take care. And take care, everyone. Be well, and see you here next time in a few weeks. Cheers.